So hello everyone, my name is Mr. Huggard. Welcome to our last reading passage section that we are going to explain to you and give you some tips on how to work your way through it and be successful with it. As you can see maybe from this page, this is what's called a paired passage, where you have a passage 1 and a passage 2, which might be something different than what you are used to seeing. And this is something you want to be comfortable with and practice as much as you can to be proficient with these types of passages. So I'm just going to go over a couple quick tips that you may have heard before, but just to kind of refresh your memories. I would recommend that you have a pencil in your hand while you're doing your reading, that you're making notes with a pencil. I would avoid a highlighter just because you're not able to use a highlighter on the actual SAT. I would recommend you do this around the same time that you would do it, take the SAT, maybe mid-morning or by noon, not later in the day. I would be sitting at a desk where it's quiet without any interruptions, and realize you probably have about, for this passage, maybe 15 minutes tops or so if you're pacing yourself. Maybe a little longer than the other passages if you get through them quickly, because you have two passages here to compare, but you really can't be giving yourself like a half hour to just work on these 10 questions, so to speak. So you're circling, you're making comments as you go. Look for evidence to support your answers. Don't make assumptions. And if we go back to what Mrs. Vaughn said in the very beginning, you kind of look at the blurb that they provide for you. So we know that we're going to have questions 42 to 52, and we have these two passages, and it tells you where they're coming from and what their titles are. The first one is called Space Mining, the Next Gold Rush. So hopefully you're somewhat familiar with the term the gold rush and what that was like in the United States when everybody was racing to get out west in the search of gold and things like that. But now it's talking about space mining, not gold mining, but space mining. And then the next passage, it says, passage 2, is called Taming the Final Frontier. And if you're careful, you notice that they're both from the same publication called New Scientist. So they had to do something about this idea of this new frontier, not the western part of the United States, but the world of space. So that's going to give you some focus as you do your reading this weekend. The other thing I would just call your attention to as a tip, when you have these questions, I was informed that maybe one way to go about it is to read passage 1 by itself, and then you see at the bottom, on the next page, question 42, from 42 all the way until 46 are all passage 1. So they don't go back and forth between passage 1, then passage 2, then passage 1, then passage 2. These are all passage 1 questions in a row. So maybe just read passage 1 by itself first, answer the questions for passage 1, and then at this point, when you finish with the passage 1 questions, then read passage 2. Then come back and answer the passage 2 questions. And there are only, I think, 2 of those. And then if you look at the next page, then after you've answered the questions for passage 2, you have a number of questions from 49 to 52 that compare the 2 passages. So before you do that, read passage 1 by itself, answer those questions, then go back, read passage 2 by itself, answer those questions, and then try to answer these questions that ask for you to compare and draw information from both passages combined. So I hope that is helpful. I wish you lots of luck, and I will talk to you next time with an explanation of the answers for these questions. So have a great day. So welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a good weekend working on your SAT passages among all your other work, but hopefully you spent some time on it and maybe put to use some of those tips I gave you about reading the passage separately, then answering those questions. So let's go into the questions themselves and let's take a look at how we did. So as we said, it's talking about this topic of space mining, and there's a very good chance you didn't know anything about space mining. Maybe you're very involved in space exploration and space travel, and that's a thing that interests you. But for most of you, that probably is not the case. But then, could you pick out the main ideas? And what was the point of view of both passages and those types of things? That's kind of what they're asking you about. You don't have to have a great knowledge or background in this material. The passages, when you have these paired passages, they're usually not always going to be both about the same type of thing. So they'll both be science passages, they'll both be history passages, and related to the same event. They might be two different perspectives on the same event or the same topic, but they are in the same general field, in this case, science. So moving down to our second page, our first question. Question 42. In lines 9 through 17, the author of passage 1 mentions several companies primarily. So here's where you go directly, of course. You look at lines 9 to 17, you review those. And what did the author identify these companies for? What purpose? Well, choice B is the correct answer. Whether it was the company of Planetary Resources of Washington, or Deep Space Industries of Virginia, or Golden Spike of Colorado, he was using them to support his earlier claim that there are many interested groups working to make space mining a reality, which was in line 8. So that's the reason why he's trying to provide evidence by mentioning those companies. In question 43, the author of passage 1 indicates that space mining could have which positive effect? So obviously we're looking for a positive effect as a result, right? Positive effect. And the correct answer for 43 is choice A. He states pretty directly that one benefit to space mining is access to precious metals and earth elements. It can be found in lines 18 to 22. Now, if you look here, if you remember, I know several of the other presenters talked about these kind of double header questions where there are two parts to them. And one tip to maybe try, if you haven't already, is to read the first part and read all the choices, then read all the lines that are providing evidence as possibilities, and then go back and answer question 43 before you answered it. So therefore, 18 and 22, you would find that supports, that provides the evidence for the question 43 about yielding those materials. Lines 18 to 22 suggest that space mining may help to meet earthly demands for precious metals and the rare earth elements vital for personal electronics. So in this statement, the author is stating materials. So the answer here, choice A, materials. These metals and earth elements are what we mean by the materials that may be important to the Earth's economy. So you, again, when you have these paired questions, read all the choices in the first question, then go to all the lines, look at all of them, don't assume, and then once you see the match, that's how you're going to determine your answer. Then go back and answer the two questions. That's just another tip to maybe try to utilize. Question 45, a vocab question. Maybe you find vocabulary the easiest part. I think the vocab on this particular passage was pretty easy. Maybe you do those first. You don't have to do these other questions first. Maybe you want to get your confidence up and do a vocab question if you feel like that's a strength for you. And it's telling you the line number again. The word demands here most nearly means. Well, D is the best answer here, meaning desires. The quote is that space mining may meet, quote, earthly demands for precious metals. Well, demands is actually being used as a noun. It may meet those demands. If you meet someone's demands is being used as a noun, meaning their desires, what they want. their wants. So that's why choice D is correct. Moving on, back up to the top of the next column. In question 46. What function does the discussion of water in lines 35 to 40 serve in passage 1? So now I have a new set of lines to pay close attention to, 35 to 40. And why does our author bring this discussion of water into the passage? What function, what is the purpose of that? And the answer to that is choice C, excuse me. It offers hypothetical examples. You know what a hypothetical example is? It's not necessarily has happened, but it could happen, something that's hypothetical. Have that part of the answer, right? Previous paragraph, previous paragraph, previous paragraph, as you can tell in each one. So you can't just say, well, it's related to the previous paragraph, but how is it related to that previous paragraph? In question 46, the answer is C, because 29 to 30, those lines in particular talk about the idea that water mined in space may be very valuable. Lines 35 to 40 support this idea by suggesting how mined space could be used, quote, for drinking or as a radiation shield, or later on, quote, to make spacecraft fuel. So those are hypothetical examples. That hasn't been done yet, but they're possible things that could occur. So that's why 46, the answer is C. Question 47. Now, if you remember from the other day, I said read passage 1 and answer all the passage 1 questions, then go read passage 2 and answer the passage 2 questions. Well, here we are with our first passage 2 question. The central claim of passage 2 is that space mining has positive potential, but, well, central is sort of one of those, what's the main message? What's the key part of that passage? What's the main idea? The central claim is that it has positive potential. That last word's important to me. But there's a catch. There's something that kind of, despite its positive potential, there's a concern there. So the answer for question 47 is B, and that is it has positive potential, but its effects should be thoughtfully considered before it becomes a reality. Because the author repeatedly mentions in passage 2 words like a pause. We should pause for thought. These consequences merit careful consideration in lines 57 and 59. So that's indicative of that we should thoughtfully consider things, the consequences or the effects of them before we make this a reality, the space mining. Question 48 is another vocab. Again, I think a fairly easy one. As used in line 68, hold most nearly means, in this case, the answer is to maintain. Choice A. The author suggests environmental arguments will be hard to hold, quote unquote, by hold he means maintain, when we are faced with possible monetary rewards in space mining. So in other words, these environmental concerns that he's bringing up might be hard to maintain or hold on to, because once people get the idea of how much money they might be able to make at this, then all of a sudden it's going to be hard to keep those environmental concerns in the forefront. Okay, I think that brings us to our next page in question 49. Last few minutes. Question 49. Which statement best describes the relationship between the two passages? So now we're finally comparing the two. Question 49, the answer is D. Passage 2 expresses reservations about developments discussed in passage 1. So just even that question we had before about hold or maintain, about the concerns that he has, I think that's fairly easy to see then the relationship. If you understood passage 2's main idea, it's expressing reservations about some of the things that are being presented in passage 1. In question 50, move this up a little bit for you. The author of passage 2 would most likely respond to the discussion of the future of space mining in lines 18 to 28 of passage 1 by claiming that such a future is or will be, choice B, will be difficult to bring about in the absence of regulation. So here's that same thought that we need some sort of oversight. If we don't have it, then we're in real danger. It'll be difficult to bring it about without any sort of regulation. We need some sort of oversight. There will be ramifications, consequences without that. You can't just have a free-for-all out there with these companies just trying to make as much money as they can without any concern for what consequences this could have on the environment, on the planet, on the moon, on these bodies in space that we're talking about mining. Question 51. Again, this is that two-parter. So this is one where you might want to, before you answer, choice B in 50, is look at all the possibilities here, and then read all of these lines over and say which fits. Well, in question 51, choice D is the answer, lines 85 to 87. So this is another two-parter here. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? In lines 85 to 87, the author of passage 2 says that the future of space mining will be difficult without regulations. Why? Because, quote, claims will be disputed, investments risky, and the gains made insecure. So that's all evidence of why it's going to be difficult to bring about space mining in the future without regulations. And then the last question, number 52, requires a little vocab understanding as well. Which point about the resources that will be highly valued in space is implicit in passage 1 and explicit in passage 2? So it's going to be hard to answer this question if you don't know the difference between something that's implicit and something that's explicit. Something is implicit, it means it's implied. It's not clearly stated, not expressly stated, but it's strongly suggested. If it's explicit, it's clearly stated. So for me, I have to find something that's clearly stated in passage 2 about resources that are highly valued in space, not just any resources, those that are highly valued. What does passage 2 say explicitly about that? Well, the correct answer here is A, that there may be different resources from those that are valuable on Earth. Passage 2 tells us that very explicitly or clearly in line 74 to 76, where it says, the resources that are valuable in orbit and beyond may be very different to those that we prize on Earth. That's, to me, very clearly stating that point. Now we have to look in passage 1 and say, is it also implied, that same idea implied, not maybe clearly stated as directly? Because in passage 1, lines 25 to 30, it suggests that water mined from space may be more valuable than metals or other Earth elements when creating an off-plant economy. So it's suggested in passage 1 implicitly, it's stated in passage 2 explicitly that they may be different resources from those that are valuable on Earth. So I hope this was helpful for all of you. I wish you all the best of luck with this. I would recommend that you keep taking as many practice tests as you can to become more and more familiar with these types of questions and these types of passages. And we'll talk to you soon. So have a great day.